Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be giving my final 2024 Senate prediction for the year of 2023. So, yeah, it is December 17th. As I'm recording this, this will be my last prediction for the 2024 Senate elections in this year, and, I'll have a prediction out in January next month. But I'm sorry that I haven't been able to post a lot in the last couple of months. I've tried, of course, to continue to make my monthly Senate predictions. Of course, I did miss out on the month of October just because that was a really, really stressful time for me, and I was preoccupied by other things. And it's continued since, but it's died down now. And now that it's the holidays, I have more time on my hands, and I am going to be producing more content for you guys over these next couple weeks. At least that's my hope. I will definitely make an effort to put out a few presidential predictions, another House prediction, and of course this video with the Senate election predictions. And also, I'll probably try to continue that series where I take a deep dive into the 2020 into specific 2024 Senate races in certain states. But today we're just going to be doing our typical, um, you know, 20 to 30 minute prediction. And we're going to be talking about the Senate. So right now, Democrats hold the Senate. Just to refresh your memory, they won it last year in 2022, retaining their Senate majority and picking up Pennsylvania. They went from winning it 50-50 in 2020 and they were able to hold on to all of their competitive all their battleground incumbents were able to win, and they were able to pick up Pennsylvania, where Pat Toomey, the incumbent Republican at the time, was retiring. John Fetterman won that race. They were able to keep several competitive or uh, Republican won races in competitive states close, like Wisconsin, Ohio, North Carolina, were all pretty close. Ohio, or I already said Ohio. Iowa was pretty close for Chuck Grassley. Florida was, of course, an exception. But either way, Democrats did pretty well, and they go into 2024 with some pretty good incumbents, but they're going to have to really, really run up the score to be able to get to that Senate majority. And it really does depend on Democrats winning the White House because they are guaranteed to lose one seat right now, and that is most likely West Virginia. And I guess we'll start filling out the map now with the safe seats. I'm rambling, we're already 2 minutes in. So the safe Democratic and Republican states, these are the states that are going to go to either party almost, or, basically certainly. They are decided by margins of 15%. The incumbent party here is going to win by over 15 percentage points. So yeah, or even if it's not quite 15 points, it's close enough. Maybe if like New Mexico, I could see that being a likely state, but Martin Heinrich's a pretty good incumbent. I think that even if he wins by like 14.5 points, I'd still consider that pretty close to safe. Technically not a safe margin, but gets to a point where, if you have too many likely states, it's kind of crazy to think about. But anyways, as I was saying, West Virginia is currently held by Democrat Joe Manchin, who is not running for re-election. There's of course been a lot of speculation that maybe he'll run for president. But either way, Manchin, even if he was going to, even if he uh, ran, I do believe he would have lost just because of the partisanship of West Virginia. And while he has been able to overcome that in the past, like in 2018, that was also a midterm year that was very beneficial to Democrats, probably more beneficial than 2024 will be. I expect it to be a more neutral year. And West Virginia, of course, is going to vote for Donald Trump or whoever the Republican nominee is by a lot. So I would have figured Manchin's going to go down anyway. But now that he's not running for re-election, that basically guarantees West Virginia will flip to the Republicans. So that would put Democrats at 50 seats, and hypothetically, as if they would, unless they'd run. I'm just filling out these safe seats and kind of talking about hypotheticals and trying not to give away my prediction. But let's assume that West Virginia, is the only seat for Republicans flip next year, just like it was in my last prediction, where I had Democrats winning 50-50. That would mean that in order to win the Senate majority, Democrats would need to win. retain all of their other seats, or get to 50 potentially if they lose one of their seats, like in Montana or Ohio, they could pick up Texas, which is a competitive race, and also win the White House, which would give them a Democratic vice president who could break the 50-50 tie, the hypothetical tie I'm talking about. That is contingent on a lot of factors, and you're starting to kind of see in states like Montana and Ohio, which voted for Democrats or voted for Republicans by pretty hefty margins in the last two presidential elections, and you have Democratic incumbents up here. Yes, they're strong, but it begs the question in a presidential year where they're going to have to outrun the top of the ticket, Biden, who is very unlikely to win both of these states and likely to lose them by decent margins. Um, is it how can they overperform by enough? It's not a question of if Sherrod Brown in Ohio can overperform enough, or it, sorry, let me rephrase that. It's not a question if of whether Sherrod Brown will overperform Joe Biden in terms of margin in the state in Ohio, but it's a matter of can he overperform by enough to win? Because Ohio is a state that voted for Trump by 8 points. It's likely going to vote for him by more next time. I'm just giving away hypotheticals here, just kind of trying to set the groundwork to kind of get you guys, or to kind of help convey the message that it's such a difficult map for Democrats. So either way, with these safe states out of the way, of course, most of these are your usual suspects. In Nebraska, that was a wonky poll showing an independent leading Deb Fischer in the normal election. I don't buy it. There's a lot of undecideds. Independents are almost always overestimated. Nebraska is a safe red state, and also there are two Nebraska Senate elections this year or next year because the other senator Ben Sass resigned earlier this year, and Pete Ricketts, the former governor, was appointed to the seat. So I think his full term is up in 2026, so he will be running again then, and I have no doubt in my mind that he will win comfortably in Nebraska. Indiana is also an open seat for Republicans, but Jim Banks, the congressman, looks very likely to hold it. Indiana's very red. There's some interesting races here in California where, Dianne Feinstein's old Senate seat is up. There's a very interesting primary there, but it'll go to a Democrat. Maryland and Delaware have retiring incumbents. Minnesota is safe blue here. You might be surprised to see that if you're not super familiar with the incumbent Amy Klobuchar. She's very popular, has won by massive margins in the past. In 2018, she won by 24. 2012, she won by 35, overperforming the top of the ticket both times. Of course, 2018 was a midterm, but she did a lot better than the governor, Tim Walz there. But I do think she wins by a little bit less this time just because of polarization, but I still think it's over 15. And Maine Angus King, independent who caucuses with Dems, he'll be fine. Could be under 15, but either way, Maine likes their independents. They have a very independent streak. They have a Republican senator, Susan Collins, so they do like to split their ticket. So yeah, so that gets Democrats to 41 Senate seats and Republicans to 47. So you can see here, if you look at the map, just Democrats are defending more seats in general. They've already gotten most of these seats out of the. We've already gotten most of them out of the way here because a lot of them are safe and Republicans have no realistic chance or have no chance of winning, but they're still at 41 seats. That's just one away. If Republicans win, hypothetically, if they win all the rest of these toss up seats, that would give them a 59 seat majority. That's one vote away from a filibuster proof majority. Um, so, yeah, we're going to go into the likely states now. These are the states that are almost certainly going to go to one side of the aisle. It's a big margin. It's a big margin territory. Like the lowest likely state can be decided by is a margin of 5 points. The largest it can be is just under 15. So you know some of these likely states are going to be a lot closer than others, but we're going to go through each of them. Um, so we'll first start off with New Jersey, which is almost certainly going to go to a Democrat. And under normal circumstances, I would put as safe blue, although it has been kind of close in the past. But Bob Menendez, being the incumbent senator, being so unpopular and scandal ridden, he's likely he might not even run for reelection. If he does, he's going to get completely destroyed in this primary. Um, Andy Kim and Tammy Murphy. Andy Kim is a congressman from southern Jersey. Tammy Murphy is the wife, is the first lady of New Jersey. She's the wife of of current Governor Phil Murphy. She is running, has a lot of the establishment behind her. Either way, Democrats are going to win this seat. I think it could be by less than 15. And if Menendez somehow it's a crazy to think about, but if he somehow gets, to win the renomination, possibly by a, divided opposition, that would really give Democrats a hard time in New Jersey. It would force them to allocate resources, and that could hurt them, by distracting them from other seats they need to defend on the Senate map. Virginia, Tim Kaine is a very good incumbent. Virginia's, still technically I wouldn't call it a safe blue state. It's still a swing state by all means, but it's a Democratic leaning swing state, and I think only under certain circumstances can it go Republican. Kaine is the former governor. He's won two, times before. He won by a whopping, I think it was 16 points. Yeah, 16 points in 2018. He was able to win he overperformed Obama in 2012 when he was running for his first term, defeated a former senator there, although, again, said senator was not super popular and did lose his reelection in 2006. But regardless, um, there's, a lot of hype about Hung Kao, who was uh, competitive with Jennifer Wexton, I'll say, in 2022 in the 10th congressional district, which is, basically it's a seat in Nova. It's in Loudoun County. But either way, Kane is a very good incumbent. I don't think, Glenn Youngkin, honestly, is the only candidate who I could realistically see winning against Kane, but that's even a bit of a stretch. He's not going to run. I think Cow or Scott Parkinson, Cow is all right as a Senate candidate. Scott Parkinson is much more right wing. Either way, I don't know if I would be comfortable putting Virginia's safety, so I'm going to put it as likely to, but either way, it is still very solidly in that Democratic column. I put it in, give Kane an 11 to 12 point advantage. Maybe that's a bit high, maybe 10 points, but low double digits. I don't really see how Democrats can lose this race unless something drastically changes. Pennsylvania also, this is typically a very close swing state. I think it'll be very close in the presidential election between Biden and Trump, who I believe will be their party's respective nominees. But Bob Casey, the incumbent Democratic senator here, is very popular. He's won three massive victories in the state. Won his first term against a Republican incumbent, Rick Santorum, by 17 points. Did a very this was a blue wave year, 2006. This was, George W. Bush's second midterm election, and he lost a lot of ground. The Democrats were able to flip 6 Senate seats, but Pennsylvania in particular, and Ohio with Sherrod Brown, he was elected the same year. They both were able to beat the incumbent Republicans here by a lot. In 2012, Casey overperformed Obama, had a pretty comfortable margin, and in 2018, he faced Lou Barletta, who was an all right candidate, for Republicans, not super controversial, but Casey was running in a blue wave year. There was no way Barletta was going to win. Now we have Dave McCormick as the presumptive GOP nominee. He's really not gotten any major opposition. All the major candidates who could have run against him have bowed out, really. He was the runner-up to Dr. Oz in the 2022 Senate primary. And while I do think he would, have done better against John Fetterman than Dr. Oz, McCormick has his own issues. He himself is somewhat of a carpetbagger. He was born and raised in Pennsylvania, but he does currently live in Connecticut, which is farther away from Pennsylvania than New Jersey is. Um, and Casey is a very popular incumbent. I think I would be incredibly surprised if he lost this race. I think McCormick has a lot of issues. I don't think he's an awful candidate. He's not. I don't see him making the same blunders as um, Dr. Oz did. I think he was just better by comparison. I don't really think there's much special about him. He'll make this race, one to watch. Definitely in that battleground category, but chances of it actually flipping red, not very likely. I would call this a 7 to 8 point victory for Bob Casey. Maybe 6, just to be safe, but I don't know. Margin overall likely, low likely, but still pretty decent size for a Democrat in Pennsylvania. Now going to the likely Republican states because I got to move this along. We're already 15 minutes in. Florida and Missouri. Missouri is going to definitely vote re-elect Josh Hawley. I just think it's going to be a little bit closer than some people might expect. Democrats, there's been a lot of hype. The Democrats have been pushing into this race. They have a decent candidate in Lucas Kuntz, who is the U.S. Marine who was a retired Marine, and he ran for Senate in 2022 but lost the primary. I think he'll do all right against Hawley. I don't think Hawley will. I think he's going to underperform Trump, but I don't think and I think he'll do pretty badly in the suburbs. And after 2022, when Eric Schmidt only won his Senate race by 13 points, I kind of find it hard to believe how Hawley could do better than him, because Schmidt, while he was, if you look at Schmidt, his record, he wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't call him non-controversial, but he doesn't have the same kind of national scorn and, kind of negative reputation that Hawley does. I think that Democrats are going to pour a lot of money in this race and they're going to be disappointed. I think they're going to lose it by 12 to 13 points. Definitely not, by probability, absolutely safe; by margin, likely. And I don't think it's close enough to 15 points for me to characterize it as otherwise. Florida, Democrats had a really bad election cycle. They've been just getting completely demolished in Florida recently. I apologize if the screen just cut out for a second. Rick Scott's not a great candidate, but he always seems in his free election, um, the free elections that he has run in, he's won each of them by narrow margins, and he won against Bill Nelson in 2018, who was a, moderate, pretty, pretty good candidate for Democrats. He won three previous terms by pretty massive margins. In 2012, he did a lot better than Obama in the state. And again, I'm, going back to 2012 a lot because that's, while Democrats were able to, or while ticket splitting was more common back then, the fact that Nelson did win by 13 points was amazing, and he won in 2000 when Al Gore lost the state. 2006, he won against the incumbent Secretary of State. Um, so he had a proven reputation in Scott while he was the governor at the time. Um, I don't think he's not a great candidate. There's been a lot of talk about him potentially facing a primary challenger. I think that's very unlikely to happen at this point. There's been no movement. Democrats have really struggled to find a candidate here, but they do have a former Congresswoman, Debbie Mercalzo Powell, running. She is decent, but again, Florida's right trending. Democrats they're just terrible at reaching out to the Hispanic communities in this state. Nationwide, Democrats aren't great with, are getting having trouble with Hispanics, but in Florida especially, it's awful. Um, and this internal poll, or this Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee poll, does show Mercalzo Powell leading, but again, Florida has always seem to be heading towards Democrats, and then it always seems to go towards the GOP. And I think Scott is going to win by 5, 6, 7 points, somewhere in that range. I think he'll do a little bit worse than whoever the GOP nominee is for president, but regardless, a win is a win. So now we have 7 states that I would characterize as competitive, like in truly battleground-esque, or battleground Senate races. You have Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Montana, and Ohio, and Wisconsin and Michigan. All of these states will be decided by less than 5 points, in my personal opinion, and we're going to go through them. So we're going to start off with I guess, should we go from east to west or west to east? Let's go east to west. So we'll start off with Ohio, which I'm going to put. So the other two categories, in case you're not familiar, are for election predictions, are lean and tilt. Lean is a margin of 1 to 5 points, for a candidate. Overall, it's, competitive, and basically the main message I'm trying to get across is a lean race is competitive, but it's pretty, you know, there's a chance of it going in the other direction, a pretty decent chance, but it's not, what you'd call a toss-up. So Ohio, I would call a toss-up as of right now, but I do think that Sherrod Brown narrowly loses re-election. As I was saying before, Donald Trump won this state in 2016 and 2020, and while Sherrod Brown has consistently been able to win by pretty decent margins, he's going to face his hardest. He's going to be up. He's in for the fight of his life. That's the best way to put it. He's raised a lot of money. These Democratic incumbents in red states like Joe Manchin, John Tester, and Sherrod Brown. Again, Manchin's not running, but still, he raised a lot of money. They've all raised, massive amounts of money. Brown's got $21 million. Republicans do have a crowded primary, a divided primary. Frank LaRose for a long time seemed like the front runner, and I would still bet my money that he does win this nomination as of today. But I'm getting less and less confident every day. I think that there's been a lot. I think that Trump is, um, there's a good chance that he does endorse Bernie Moreno, who is the most right wing of these candidates, and for a state like Ohio, which is Trumpy, not necessarily a bad. He's not necessarily, um, you would think that running a Trumpy candidate in a Trumpy, you know, light red state like Ohio would be pretty good. Would be a pretty pretty good choice. But Moreno also is does present issues because Brown is very strong with the working class voter. He's, really an anomaly in Ohio. He's the last remaining statewide elected Democrat in this, in Ohio, and I think that Moreno, while he might be able to reach out to Trump, more conservative, rural-leaning voters, which, just like Trump, I think he's going to have trouble. I think his positions on issues like abortion are going to hurt him in the suburbs, which I think will shift towards Brown relative to how they were in 2018, at least in the case of like the Cincinnati or Columbus suburbs, and maybe Cincinnati. But either way, Frank LaRose and Matt Dolan would be better choices than Moreno. Who's going to get the nomination? I don't know. I'd still bet on LaRose, but I think that if Moreno does get it, that's really bad for Republicans. I think that that could cost them this Senate seat. Overall, I think Brown will overperform by a lot, but I still think that just the weight of the partisan, the the continued decline in ticket splitting and in elections, especially in presidential elections, and the fact that Trump's going to win the state by um, probably anywhere from 8 to 12 points. I think, I'd say right now Trump wins by maybe 10 in Ohio. I think Brown is going to have a really hard time overcoming that, so I think he narrowly loses by like a point. Then we go to, further up through the Rust Belt, we're going to go to Michigan. Michigan this is an open race for Democrats. They do have a retiring incumbent here, Debbie Stabenow, who's been in the Senate since 2000, or was first elected in 2000. Um, and this is going to be an interesting race. Elisa Slotkin looks to be the front runner for the Democratic nomination, although Hill Harper, who's an actor and he's gotten more support from the progressive wing of the party, does seem to have a decent shot at winning the nomination. But I think Slotkin right now, in terms of fundraising, in terms of polling, and name recognition, I think she's really going to take this nomination away from him. While Republicans have a crowded primary, for a while they didn't have a lot of people. They have James Craig, who was a former chief of the Detroit Police Department, and he ran for governor in 2022. Peter Meyer, and one of the 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump in 2021, and Mike Rogers, who was the former representative from the same Lansing area based seat that Slotkin now holds. It was, of course, different lines, but he was a representative who retired 8 years ago. He's coming back to run for Senate. He seems to have the support of the NRSC, or at least, the more establishment wing. I think right now, you know, any of these candidates, none of them are terrible. I think Meyer, a lot of people underestimate because of his in it. They worry. A lot of Republican leaning election forecasters think that he would really struggle to get out rural voters. But I mean, at the same time, they're going to come out for Trump anyway. I think Meyer would be decent for independents. He has no chance, basically, at winning the nomination. I think James Craig or Mike Rogers, either of them would be fine. I think Rogers is the most realistic, um, Republican nominee who could win the general election. I think Craig has more issues. I think the fact that he was disqualified from the ballot in 2022 for governor because I think he um over what he lied about the number of signatures that he had received to get on the ballot. But overall, I think Slotkin right now is a favorite in this race. Michigan has been very decent for Democrats as of late. It's a swing state, but Slotkin is decent for independent voters. And I do think that the Democratic groups, though a lot of people are worrying about Joe Biden's ability to turn them out for the presidential race, And while I think that's a valid concern, I think that they are underestimating Biden and they're underestimating Democrats like they did in 2022. And I think Michigan votes first lock in by 3 to 4 points as of right now. I think Craig is the most likely candidate for the nomination. I could also see it being Rogers. Meyer, maybe, Meyer getting it is like a snowball's chance in hell. But um, I think that right now I'm pretty comfortable putting Michigan in the lean blue category. Wisconsin, I'm also going to be putting in that category. I think Tammy Baldwin is in a very good spot for reelection. Republicans really just they don't have this race has really not ramped up yet. All of their major heavy hitters, Mike Gallagher, Tom Tiffany, Scott Walker, have all declined to run because they don't think that, likely because they don't think they can beat Baldwin, who has proven herself to be a pretty formidable candidate. Meanwhile, you have the remaining three. You have Eric Hovd and Scott Mayer, who are more of these business types who Republicans have been trying to recruit because of their ability to self-fund in the race. Then you have David Clark, who was a former Democrat. He was the Milwaukee County Sheriff, and he's very controversial, very pro-Trump. Um, he's the most likely candidate to be, or he's most likely going to be the nominee. He hasn't announced his candidacy yet, but if he does run, he has it. And I think Baldwin really, with her ability just to turn out the Democratic establishment or the Democratic base in Wisconsin while appealing to independent voters. Um, I think that that really does put this race right now firmly in the lean D category. I know a lot of people for a while had this race in likely D. I was close to it. I think right now I'm more comfortable putting it in lean D just because a 5 point victory for a Democrat in Wisconsin, that's a bit much to ask. I know Wisconsin has voted for Baldwin by, likely margins in both of her elections before, but 2024, I think, will be different. Still, I do think she will win re-election. I think that she's in a very good position right now. Let's go down to Texas. Ted Cruz is running for re-election here. He had a pretty close race back in 2018 against Beto O'Rourke. Democrats have been making inroads in Texas, especially as the state's population continues to grow. Its population centers like Dallas, Austin, Houston, and San Antonio have all gotten to be really, really um, really, really shifted to the left. A lot of that, I think, comes down to the diversification of these suburbs. Texas is a very growing state. It's now the second most populated state in the nation. It's also, I think, because Donald Trump is just not a great candidate for Texas. And I think that Cruz is cut from the same cloth as a Trump. While Democrats aren't running O'Rourke again, they do have a couple candidates. Colin Allred is a congressman from Dallas. He is a third term congressman, not very well known, but he's a pretty viable candidate. He's raised a lot of money. He seems to be the favorite for the nomination. And I think that he's a, well respected by House Democrats. Um, he had was even though he's only been around for 3 terms, he's become an influential voice in his party, in his caucus, and I think that um he will give Cruz a run for his money. Now, do I think that in 2024 will be the year the Democrats finally win Texas? No, I don't think so. I think that Cruz is still favored here by 3.5 points. I think he'll underperform Trump, who I expect to win the state by like 4. I do think Texas will shift left relative to 2020 and 2024. I think Cruz will have a similar margin of victory as his victory. I think Cruz will win by a similar margin as he did in 2018, but overall, I'd still call this race pretty competitive. Would I say it's the most attainable for Democrats? No, but I do think that if there is one Republican held seat that they can flip in 2024, it's Texas. That's for sure. Um, so yeah, I think that is where Texas stands right now. Now we're going to go on to these free states. Republicans have won the majority, as you can see, 51 Senate seats. So even if Democrats do retain control of the White House, they would still come up short because the Senate wouldn't be tied. So the vice president would not break the tie for them to win the majority. So now we're going to go on to these three remaining states. We're going to start off in Arizona, where I do think that Ruben Gallego is still the favorite. to win this race, despite Kirsten Sinema's continued consistently strong numbers in polling. But again, independents are always overestimated in polls. Carrie Lake is very likely going to be the GOP nominee. She was a very bad candidate for governor in 2022. She lost to Katie Hobbs. Um, and of course, she was expected to win because Hobbs she did not run a great campaign, but Arizona has really, really rejected Trumpism in general. And I think the prospects of a freeway race in this state do definitely should concern Democrats. I don't think that this polling should be taken for granted, but Arizona polls do historically overestimate Republicans, and the fact that an NRSC internal poll did show Gallego, who's a congressman, he's the de facto Democratic nominee. The fact that he's leading in this internal poll in a freeway matchup, I think that that should really concern Republicans. I think that Arizona um, Gallego really does have. I think Gallego is not going to be as inhibited by the GOP or by Kirsten Sinema's third party bid. I mean, geez, let me slow down. I don't think Kirsten Sinema, first of all, has not announced whether or not she's going to run for re-election. My guess is yes, but of course, if she continues to see these numbers where she's staying in, second or third place and is really acting as more of a spoiler to either Gallego or Carrie Lake, she might decide not to do it. I'm sure we'll find out in a couple months what her decision is. Right now, I lean towards she does run. But even if she does, I think she's going to take away votes from both sides. I think that she'll make it a close race, but I think that Ruben Gallego right now would win over enough independents. I don't think Cinema, she's unpopular with both parties and independents in the state, and Carrie Lake is not the candidate who I believe would be able to win this race for the Republicans. I really do think that Arizona right now is narrowly tilting towards the Democratic Party. Okay. Then we go to Nevada, which I'm going to continue to put as lean D. I considered moving it down to tilt just because Democrats do have a problem in Clark County. I think Biden's going to have some trouble here in 2024, but Democrats consistently find a way to maintain their coalition and bring out their working class coalition of working class Hispanics in Vegas while winning in the suburbs. And Republicans do have a contested primary here. Sam Brown, who was the runner up to Adam Laxalt in the Senate primary last year, he seems to be the front runner. He's got the NRSC chairman Steve Daines endorsement. He seems to be leading fundraising and in polling, although there is a lot of undecided voters here. But for a while, I thought Jim Marchant was going to be the nominee. He was the nominee for Secretary of State in 2022, and he lost pretty badly. But he's just really struggled to raise money. And when you see the amount that he has spent, and the amount of cash on hand he has versus Brown, I mean, look at that. Brown has barely spent any of that $1.2 million he has. Marchant's almost out of cash, and I think that he's going to have a really hard time winning this race, even though he is the more Trumpy-ish candidate. But Brown, I think, he's a decent candidate. He has a compelling backstory. I won't get too much into it just for the sake of time, but I think he'll put up a good fight against Rosen. Nevada's always a close state, but it almost always votes for the Dems, and I think Jackie Rosen, she's a pretty decent incumbent. She beat Dean Heller by an impressive amount in 2018, although again, I think some of that was due to the fact that Nevada was, that Heller was up during a blue wave year and it was a midterm, and I think right now, Democrats will continue their winning streak in Nevada, and Rosen will win by about 2 points. Brown is definitely a better candidate than Marchant, but how much better? I don't know. Then we go to Montana. And Montana, this is a very, very conflicting race for me because this state voted for Trump by 16 points in 2020, but John Tester is wickedly popular. He's got like a 60% approval rating. Now, is he going to win 60% of the vote? Absolutely not. I, for months, have put this race in the tilt Democratic column, calling it a toss up. But more recently, I've started to kind of change my opinion on this race. Matt Rosendale, who was the Senate nominee in 2018, who was widely expected, still is widely expected to launch a Senate bid, has yet to do so. He, I think, presents a lot of issues for Republicans. I think that if there was one candidate I think he is the weaker candidate rather than the current front runner for the seat for the nomination, Tim Sheehy, who is an outsider, has the NRSC's endorsement, and has been starting to chip away at Rosendale's lead in the primary polling. He also has, basically $3 million, whereas Rosendale has really waited months and months and months since Politico reported that he was preparing to jump into this race, and he's continued to tease it that he will run. But I'm getting less and less confident of that every day, and I think that his chances at winning the nomination are dropping. I think that at first it seemed like that um, the Rosendale was destined to be the nominee if he chose to run. Um, but now he seems to be gaining momentum. He's becoming more well known, and while he is a political outsider, and that presents some uncertainties for Republicans, I think for them, in their eyes, running Rosendale is more of a risk than taking a risk with Sheehy is worth not renominating Rosendale, who they know has already lost a race. And while you can argue partisanship and outrunning the top of the ticket will be an issue for Tester, and so that's how Rosendale could win again, and I agree with that. But again, in their eyes, they saw what happened in 2022 when they nominated these more extreme candidates that were more loved by the MAGA base, and most of them lost. And I think that that's what they're seeing with Sheehy, who is again still a pretty MAGA candidate, but he appeals more. He is less controversial than Rosendale, and I think that overall, with Trump winning the state by likely winning this Montana by a lot against Joe Biden at the top of the ticket, and John Tester's just the fact that he did survive 2018, despite because Trump won Montana by 20 points in 2016, and he also won Indiana and Missouri by pretty similar margins, and both of those. Both of the Democratic incumbents in these states lost their reelection. The fact that Tester was able to hold on was pretty impressive. So I'll give him that. I'm not here to say Tester doesn't have a shot. He absolutely does. I've been a big believer in that for a long time. But I do think right now, with just all the ticket split, with just the polarization, that's the word I've been thinking of. I keep saying outrunning the top of the ticket. I was thinking there's another word to describe this. Yeah, the polarization that's set in American politics and between presidential and Senate election results, and just the overall GOP advantage in Montana, on the presidential level. I just think right now I'm not comfortable putting Tester as the favorite right now. I think Sheehy is a better candidate than Rosendale. Of course, he's an outsider. We don't know a lot about him. He could have some major scandal, but again, and a lot of the outsider candidates did happen to be the more MAGA candidates in 2022 for Republicans, which again is a valid concern. I know a lot of people think Sheehy is overrated, but again, like Rosendale's not a great candidate either. But either way, I think that Tester's going to have a hard time winning re-election. Is it impossible? No, it's a toss-up race. I'm putting it in the tilt R column for right now. I just think that I'm not comfortable putting a Trump 16 state, a state that Trump won by 16 points in 2020, and is likely going to win by a similar amount next year. I'm not comfortable putting that Senate race in that state and giving it to the Democratic incumbent, even if he is a very strong candidate. I'm not saying this can't change, but right now, I do think Republicans will win back control of the Senate. This is a reversal from my last prediction, where I did have Democrats winning 50-50. Uh, Republicans pick up West Virginia, Ohio, and Montana, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania all stay blue. Oh, and Republicans also hold on to competitive seats in Texas and Florida. This video was still very long, typical of these Senate election prediction videos, but I just wanted to get through all these states. So overall, this is my personal prediction. Again, this is not fact. I'm very sure that this will change, that this will not be how my final prediction looks. But overall, I think if the election were held today, Democrats would be underdogs to win control of the Senate, which is what I've been saying for some time. Of course, my last prediction, I did believe they were going to win, but, you know, in hindsight, I don't, now I don't think that. So yeah, this is where I stand. This is my personal prediction. Don't take it as fact. If you have your own, if you disagree with this map, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. And check out some of my other content. Check out my non-political channel, Interactor127. And yeah, I hope y'all have a great day. I'll be back with a house prediction in the next couple of days. And I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.